Can you hear me? I am here today because I cannot be there with you today. But thank you for coming. Thank you for your resolve, your generosity of spirit. On Wednesday night, after a threat was sent to this embassy and police descended on this building, you came out in the middle of the night to watch over it. And you brought the world's eyes with you. Inside this embassy after dark, I could hear teams of police swarming up into the building through its internal fire escape. But I knew there would be witnesses, and that is because of you. If the UK did not throw away the Vienna Conventions the other night, it is because the world was watching. And the world was watching because you were watching. So the next time somebody tells you that it is pointless to defend those rights that we hold dear, remind them of your vigil in the dark before the Embassy of Ecuador. Remind them how, in the morning, the sun came up on a different world and a courageous Latin American nation took a stand for justice. And so to those brave people, I thank President Correa for the courage he has shown in considering and in granting me political asylum. And I also thank the government, and in particular Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino, who upheld the Ecuadorian Constitution and its notion of universal citizenship in their consideration of my asylum. And to the Ecuadorian people for supporting and defending this Constitution. And I also have a debt of gratitude to the staff of this embassy, whose families live in London and who have shown me hospitality and kindness despite the threats we all received. This Friday, there will be an emergency meeting of the foreign ministers of Latin America in Washington, D.C. to address this very situation. And so I am grateful to those people and governments of Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Argentina, Peru, Venezuela, and to all other Latin American countries who have come out to defend the right to asylum. And to the people of the United States, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Australia, who have supported me in strength even when their governments have not. And to those wiser heads in government who are still fighting for justice, your day will come. To the staff, supporters, and sources of WikiLeaks, whose courage and commitment and loyalty has seen no equal. To my family and to my children who have been denied their father, forgive me, we will be reunited soon. As WikiLeaks stands under threat, so does the freedom of expression and the health of all our societies. We must use this moment to articulate the choice that is before the government of the United States of America. Will it return to and reaffirm the values, the revolutionary values it was founded on? Or will it lurch off the precipice, dragging us all into a dangerous and oppressive world in which journalists fall silent under the fear of prosecution and citizens must whisper in the dark? I say it must turn back. I ask President Obama to do the right thing. The United States must renounce its witch hunt against WikiLeaks. The United States must dissolve its FBI investigation. The United States must vow that it will not seek to prosecute our staff or our supporters. The United States must pledge before the world that it will not pursue journalists for shining a light on the secret crimes of the powerful. There must be no more foolish talk about prosecuting any media organisation, be it WikiLeaks or be it the New York Times. The US administration's war on whistleblowers must end. Thomas Drake, William Binney, John Kirikou and other heroic whistleblowers must be pardoned or compensated for the hardships they have endured as servants of the public record. And to the Army private who remains in a military prison in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, who was found by the United Nations to have endured months of torturous detention in Quantico, Virginia, and who has yet, after 2 years in prison, to see a trial, he must be released. Bradley Manning must be released. If Bradley Manning did as he is accused, he is a hero and an example to all of us, and one of the world's foremost political prisoners. Bradley Manning must be released. On Wednesday, Bradley Manning spent his 815th day of detention without trial. The legal maximum is 120 days. On Thursday, my friend Nabil Rajab, president of the Bahrain Human Rights Centre, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for a tweet. On Friday, a Russian band was sentenced to 2 years in jail for a political performance. There is unity in the oppression. There must be absolute unity and determination in the response. Thank you.
Are they? Okay. Hello, can you hear me? My name is Tariq Ali, and I'm here on behalf of the broad coalition of people here and in Europe and in other parts of the world, South America, from where I've just returned, who are backing Julian Assange and backing the decision of the Ecuadorian government to give him asylum. I think the situation will be clarified over the next few days. Tomorrow in Washington, D.C., an emergency conference of the Organization of American States has been called, with only 5 members voting against, including the United States and Canada. But the meeting will take place, and there is only one item on the agenda of this meeting, which is the threats made to the Ecuadorian embassy by the British Foreign Secretary. Subsequently, in South America, there will be a meeting of the Bolivarian republics, and we hope Argentina and Brazil, to make it very clear that Ecuador, while it has acted alone, has the support of a huge majority of the South American continent. Now, this afternoon we're here to show our solidarity with Julian Assange and the decision of the Ecuadorian government. We have speakers who will be speaking for making short speeches. Then we will be open to answer questions from the press, and after that Julian Assange will speak. By that time I hope the sky will be totally blue, but we shall wait. So the situation we confront today now is a stalemate. There is a confrontation which is not of our choosing, because the right to claim asylum is the right of any citizen anywhere in the world. And we have to be very clear. It doesn't happen often in the Western world, because it is assumed that civil liberties are safe. But habeas corpus has been suspended in this country. There have been renditions. Citizens, non-citizens have been picked off the streets and sent to torture camps, either at Guantanamo or in various Arab countries which specialized in this. And so when people now decide that they will not trust the legal system in the European world because of its extra-legal actions over the last 10 years, and will certainly not trust the United States, where the treatment of Bradley Manning has been an absolute disgrace. So there is a reason for seeking asylum now. I hope that there are not too many episodes like this, that civil liberties as we once knew them are restored, because it puts a tremendous burden on everyone in this country and elsewhere, and on people who are forced to do this. So the position is very clear. The central issue, as has been made obvious, is the fear of Julian Assange, and it's a totally understandable fear that he could be deported to a third country, that this is not a footling little investigation, not even proven, mounted by Swedish prosecutors, and its acceptance shamefully by the Supreme Court in this country, with judges dissenting, giving dissenting opinions on this within Britain itself. That it is not simply a question of that. That on its own is not the major issue. The major issue is the fear of extradition to the United States, and there is a very simple solution. If, as many newspapers and many government supporters are alleging, this is paranoia, the simplest way, if indeed it is paranoia, is for the United States Justice Department and State Department give a very clear statement saying that the United States has no desire, no intention to demand the extradition of Julian Assange. That is all we are asking for. Let them do it, and there could be a compromise solution very, very rapidly between the Ecuadorian government and the British Foreign Office. The Ecuadorians, I was in Ecuador 2 weeks ago, met the president. They have absolutely no desire to get entangled in a huge row with Britain. It's not their way, it's not their intention. They want a peaceful settlement, and all they ask is an assurance that Julian Assange will not be extradited to a third country, and that is what we hope to achieve with the campaigning we're doing now. Now, unfortunately, we have got many messages from people who can't be here for one reason or the other, and these messages will be read out by spokespeople who are here on their behalf. After that, these messages are over, you can meet all the people here, and after that is over, we will go and, or we will stay and listen to Julian. Now, the first message is from Vivienne Westwood, not normally known as a paranoid personality, and the message will be read by Cynthia King.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Vivian really regrets not being here today. She wants to underline her unequivocal support for Julian, and she's asked me to read out this message, which I received from her this morning. Through WikiLeaks, Julian Assange continues to expose... Sorry? Thank you. Through WikiLeaks, Julian Assange continues to expose the lies and distortions of the authorities. His fight is our fight. It is a fight for freedom, freedom of information. We are Julian Assange. I am Julian Assange. With love from Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Cynthia, and our solidarity with Vivian wherever she is. The next is Roman Gavros, filmmaker, friend of the campaign, will read John Pilger's speech. Pilger is doing sterling work in Australia, campaigning for Julian in his homeland, and couldn't be with us. Roman.
Hello. Sorry, I'm French, so sorry for my clumsiness. I'll try to read the best I can. I have known, so it's from John Pilger. I have known Julian since he came to London and gave the world vital information about Afghanistan, Iraq, which government had suppressed and denied. What is always left out of the public portrayal of Julian is the moral dimension of WikiLeaks. The very emotion of morality, of principle, embarrasses those who consort with great power, but ordinary people recognize it straight away and are not embarrassed. They're inspired. WikiLeaks is about the public's right to know and the right to practice the kind of real journalism that made Julian powerful enemies. Enemies he should wear as a badge of courage. Indeed, the whole point about Julian is courage. This is why this is a day of triumph. Triumph for human courage, for principle, for truth. Julian has not broke free, not yet. But with the help of Admiral Rafael Correa and his comrades in the embassy, he has seized back the initiative from those who think they have the divine right to rule the world, lie, and commit war crimes in our name. We should celebrate our resistance and salute Julian. John Pilger.
The third absentee friend, because he's not well, is Ken Loach, the film director, and Rebecca, who has worked with him forever, is here to read a message.
Hi, everybody. The sun's come out, which is good news. I've been working with Ken Loach and Paul Laverty for a very long time, and with them, we give you this message. Julian Assange needs our support. He and WikiLeaks have exposed the dirty secrets of the powerful. Remember WikiLeaks revealing US war crimes in Iraq, firing on unarmed civilians from an Apache helicopter? Nothing but cold-blooded murder. We know the gross brutality the US and Britain will use against those it sees as its enemies. The coups in Latin America, Guantanamo, and now the terror inflicted on Bradley Manning. With right-wingers in the States calling for his execution, Julian has every reason to fear for his safety. But look at the bigger picture. There is much talk of due process and the rule of law. What hypocrisy! Tell that to those left in the shattered ruins of Iraq. More than 1 million dead in a war that was plainly illegal. The US has no regard for due process or international law. Julian needs the protection of all who care for freedom of information and real journalism. Solidarity with Julian Assange.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. We hope Ken gets well soon. He is someone also with whom we express our solidarity because he knows what it's like to receive a bad press and many other things. The last official speaker is someone who has a valiant record, someone who worked in the British Foreign Office for quite some time, was a British ambassador. His last posting was to Uzbekistan, where asylum was considered, where refugees were sometimes led into the British Embassy in that country. And Craig Murray has now, even though he's not that old, has become a veteran fighter for civil rights, for civil liberties, all over the world. And it's with very great pleasure that I now call on Craig Murray.
Thank you. We should not forget what this is about. This is about the persecution of an individual who has made life much more simple and more productive for whistleblowers in the information age, and in an age when, as Western governments become increasingly authoritarian and civil liberties are diminished, we need whistleblowers more than ever to protect the rights of all of us. We have heard of the areas where WikiLeaks have been active, not only the prosecution of illegal war in Iraq, but the revealing of individual war crimes carried out within that war. The targeting of people for assassination throughout the world, and the collusion of governments of different stripes in that targeting, the torture and rendition of individuals. Now consider this. I blew the whistle on torture and extraordinary rendition and the collusion of the CIA and MI6. I was, in consequence, immediately charged with extortion for sexual purposes in exchange for British visas. It took me 1.5 years to clear my name of those charges, because they routinely charge and try to frame and fit up whistleblowers, and that is what is happening to Julian Assange just as it happened to me. I shared a platform across the United States with a very brave lady, Brigadier Janice Karpinski, who was the senior woman in the United States Army. She blew the whistle on the fact that she had seen documents signed personally by Donald Rumsfeld authorizing the torture at Abu Ghraib. The very next day, she was charged with shoplifting. I could name 5 or 6 examples straight away of individual whistleblowers who are always immediately charged with offences which don't relate to whistleblowing at all, because in the United States and the United Kingdom and apparently Sweden today, just as it used to always happen in authoritarian and totalitarian countries, dissidents are not charged with political offences, they are fitted up with criminal offences. That is the state our society has come to. How likely is it that when I was engaged in a bitter struggle, an internal struggle with my own government who were trying to sack me over the use of torture, and I was trying to prevent the use of torture, did I then think, oh, that's a good idea, I'll go and rape someone tomorrow while I'm in the middle of this? Was Julian Assange, while conducting the campaign of WikiLeaks, so distracted he decided to get into incidental and coincidental criminal activity? Did Donald Rumsfeld get outed as the man who authorized torture by Janice Karpinski just for her to think the very next day she would pop out and do a bit of shoplifting? No! Only our disgustingly complacent and spoon-fed mainstream media would accept such a narrative for one single moment. It is obviously nonsense to anybody with half a day. Now then, let me come to William Hague. William Hague told us that when he was a student, he used to drink 14 pints of beer a day. I tell you something, he must have drunk 28 pints the day he decided to threaten to illegally invade the embassy of Ecuador and violate Ecuadorian national territory. The Vienna Convention is absolutely plain. The Vienna Convention of 1961 is the single most subscribed international treaty in existence. And it states in Article 22, Section 1, that the diplomatic premises of an embassy are inviolable. Full stop. Are inviolable. You cannot invade the embassy of another country. As Tariq rightly said, there were times when I sheltered Uzbek dissidents from their government within the confines of the British Embassy in Uzbekistan. Even during the height of the tensions of the Cold War, the opposing parties never entered each other's embassies to abduct a dissident. The fact that William Hague now openly threatens the Ecuadorians with the invasion of their sovereign premises is one further example of the total abandonment of the very concept of international law by the neoconservative juntas that are currently ruling the former Western democracies. I quoted the Vienna Convention to you. The law that applies within the Embassy of Ecuador is the law of Ecuador. when I served for over 20 years as a British diplomat, if I'd ever murdered my ambassador in the embassy, and there were times I was tempted, that would have been prosecuted under UK law, and it would have been these gentlemen from the Metropolitan Police who would have come out to the British Embassy to investigate the crime that had taken place on British soil. And I tell you this, in international law and in Ecuadorian law, whatever British domestic legislation may say, if the Metropolitan Police enter the premises of the Ecuadorian embassy, they are subject to Ecuadorian law, and they are committing a crime under Ecuadorian law for which those individual policemen are quite rightly liable to prosecution. And I can tell you something else for certain. The position I've just outlined, that the invasion of a diplomatic premises is a crime in international law and a crime in the state whose premises are invaded, that is a position which is taken by virtually every country in the world. And it is a crime which is eminently extraditable. So any policeman who forcibly enters the premises of the Embassy of Ecuador will find himself liable for extradition to Ecuador as soon as he leaves the United Kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming here to listen. I thank deeply and from my heart those of you who have come to support Julian Assange and support his continuing struggle for freedom and to support the continuing cause of whistleblowing and revealing that which government does not want you to know. We are here today for freedom. Here we stand. We thank the Ecuadorian government for their support, and we stand with Julian Assange. Thank you very much.
Friends, we are almost ended this first part of this afternoon's events, but before we open it to questions from the press and before Julian speaks, I think one aspect of all this has not yet been dealt with, and it needs to be understood, especially in the Western world. Why is it that an Australian citizen facing prosecution by a European country decides to appeal for asylum to a South American republic? And the reason for that is that for the last 10 to 15 years now, huge changes have been taking place in South America. And these changes are very interesting. For a whole while, as many of you will know, South America was governed by military dictatorships of one sort or the other, backed by the United States and its European partners, and allowed to do whatever they wanted. They were taught how to torture, they were taught how to kill, and they carried on doing it till the changes began. And the changes began for social and economic reasons, it should be pointed out. The changes began when the people in Venezuela, who were the first, said enough. Enough of IMF regulations, enough of World Bank rules. We don't like neoliberalism. We don't like the way our oligarchs are running this country. We don't want to live in a world where everything is privatized, where there are no public sector engagements. That is what started it off. And there have been more elections in Venezuela than in any other country of the world since that time. Referendums launched against, won by the Bolivarians. A new constitution in which a population has the right, if it so wishes, to get signatures so that an elected president can be recalled way beyond the next election is due. All this had happened. And that Venezuelan model in different ways spread all over the world. It spread to Bolivia. It spread to Ecuador. It spread for a while to Paraguay, to Honduras. It had a huge impact in Brazil. And we don't have the world of the West now in many, many South American countries. What do? They have oil wealth. They have other wealth. They don't allow it to go to the fat cats. They don't allow it to go to bankers. They spend it on free education. They spend it on hospitals. They have created new universities free of charge for poor kids. They refuse to follow the Western model where everything is privatized, including the armies and including the police force now we hear. Everything is being privatized, for somehow these people feel it's better. The train system is privatized here. In South America, they're trying to construct a new one. And so these radical social democratic governments in South America are today, in my opinion, offer more social and human rights to their citizens than the countries of Europe, leave alone the United States. And that is why Julian Assange applies for asylum to Ecuador, because this is a country which is determined to be independent. It has asked the American military base in Mantua to leave the country. And when the United States objected, Rafael Correa, the president of Ecuador, said, okay, if you want a base here, let's have equality. Why can't we have a military base in Florida? To even ask the question is considered crazy. And there was no agreement. Out went the base. A new constitution that defends human rights. A serious attempt to defend the ecology of the country. Social spending has doubled. And for me, human rights mean nothing unless there are social rights as well for the ordinary people of a country. The two go hand in hand. And it is these changes in South America which have now come to the fore in a big way by this one event. But that is why Julian Assange appealed to Ecuador for asylum, and that is why I think in this week that lies ahead, he will receive the backing of a large majority of the South American continent. And the Europeans, European governments and European citizens, if they wished to, could learn a lot from South America today. Just change your gaze. The gaze of Europe is constantly fixed in the direction of North America. They should just shift it, at least for a year or two, to South America, and maybe conditions and the lives of ordinary people who live in Europe would be improved as a result. Instead, despite this huge social and economic crisis, they go on as if nothing's happened. Well, for them, nothing's happened. For ordinary people who live in this country, whatever their class, their creed, their color, they suffer. And they react angrily sometimes. And South America offers the beginnings of a model against that. Thank you very much. And now we are happy to answer questions from the media, if they want. No one here from... Yeah. We'll repeat your question. Ask it. The question is, there was a law in 1986, I'm repeating the questioner, which gave the British government permission to invade an embassy.
Domestic law cannot simply override international law. The Chinese government could pass a law saying they had the right to invade the British embassy, but that would be in conflict with the Vienna Convention, to which China is a party. Domestic law must conform with international law to which the state is a party. When I said that any policeman who entered the Ecuadorian embassy would be subject to the law of Ecuador on diplomatic premises, that undoubtedly is the position within international law, whatever British domestic legislation may say. You cannot simply legislate domestically and opt out of international law unless Britain could do that if it withdrew from the Vienna Convention, which would then mean that no British embassy and no British diplomat would have any protection anywhere worldwide. And one thing I can tell you for certain is that the British diplomatic service is extremely unhappy at this threat by William Hague. I've spoken personally to British ambassadors who are very, very unhappy, because not only does it make every British embassy around the world liable to invasion, it also makes us look very, very stupid, because no country, not one country, has come out in support of William Hague's interpretation of international law. A lot of South American countries have already come out condemning it, and tomorrow they will do so as a body. Russia has come out condemning it. Britain has not even been able to find a single EU or NATO country to come out in support of its right to invade the Ecuadorian embassy, because that right is not accepted by any country in the world.
Thanks. Yeah, any other questions? No? Yeah.
Is there a way that the British government can revoke Ecuador's diplomatic status so that it can stop it being an embassy?
Well, the question is there any way in which the British government could revoke Ecuador's diplomatic status? Yes, governments can do that by declaring, they don't have to give a reason, though they usually do. Not just the British government, any government can do that by declaring particular diplomats or entire diplomatic mission persona non gratis, which means all the diplomats would have to leave the country and relations with that country would be broken off. But I don't think anyone is suggesting that that is what is going to happen, because it would be a huge escalation. And as I pointed out, they might then have to break off diplomatic relations not just with Ecuador but with several other South American countries, which not even the craziest person in the British Foreign Office is going to recommend. Anything else, guys? Yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much. We will now remove ourselves and wait for Julian, who will be speaking in about 10 to 15 minutes. Thanks.